Welcome back to Kings of Columbus. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis, and we're here to answer your questions about, I was going to say about life. It's not. It's about football because it's football time because it's always football time, Bill Landis. So we've grabbed 11 questions from our tech subscriber audience. We'll do what you watching, what you eating, what you thinking at the end of the show. But it's some big picture football stuff. It's some little picture football stuff. And there's someone asking if I am willing to make a public apology, which we probably could make a regular segment if we wanted to. Doug's public apology, right? People go
yeah, but then we have nothing else to talk about.
Yeah. Every show would just be, I was wrong. So let's dive right in because we don't like to mess around. We like to get to the ball. And number one is from our good friend, Evan in Oregon, who asks and says, actually, we accept comments as well as questions.
Sure.
College football hasn't had a super team since 2021 Alabama. It's actually 2020 Alabama, right? This could be chalked up to the introduction of the portal and NIL. If Ohio State has the first super team since then, and it comes after the rule changes, it gives me much confidence in the idea of an indestructible Ohio State football program. They would be the first 4-team playoff champ. They'd be the first super team in the new world and the first 12-team playoff champ. What do you think of this concept, Bill? And I think Evan is perhaps referencing something that we did 8 years ago now at Cleveland.com, where we did a series on indestructible Ohio State. And the theory there was less, it's actually a little different, I think. Maybe Evan's not referencing that at all. He just used the same adjective. You're allowed, we can share adjectives in this great big world of ours. Our idea then was that Ohio State never falls in a hole, never disappears from the national scene the way Alabama did for a while, the way Michigan did for a while, the way USC has right now, the way Texas did for a while. Everybody else has moments where, yeah, you're a blue blood, but like you haven't mattered for 5 years. And Ohio State almost has not had that in its history. So that was that indestructible conversation. And you can still find it on the Google machine. If you want to Google indestructible Ohio State, that's what'll pop up. You like that series, didn't you? Enjoy?
I loved it. I was actually thinking it might be worth revisiting given the way that college football has changed.
Ooh. I'll write that down. Take notes. So that's one idea of indestructible. What do you think about this idea of, I think you can apply like the 2002 national title was, part of that moment in time. The 2014 title, things have changed. This title would be in a world where things have changed. If they do this, does it tell you that like, man, Ohio State is bulletproof?
Yeah, no, I think so. I guess I would say that I've never wavered much in my confidence in this idea of Ohio State being wholly indestructible is probably a little too bold, but the most indestructible compared to the rest of college football.
I'm not sure if it's too bold. Like it just
feels like tempting fate. It just feels like tempting fate.
So you would say it every day right up to the day when it's no longer true. But at the moment you would say, well, when was the last time it wasn't true?
Right. And even in those brief moments where you thought it was possibly not true, it was like, nope, they figured it out. They're back. So it's like it's never lingered longer than like a year. So no, this is a really interesting thought process from Evan. Like I think, I don't know, I guess it would reinforce that idea for the rest of the sport, which I guess would not be all that comforting for the rest of the sport, for Ohio State to have just adapted again, I guess, to the changes in college football, right? I think that's probably the most maddening part for it. Like as an Ohio State fan, they should make it feel awesome. And like for me, like I said, like I've never really waned in my confidence about Ohio State's ability to adapt. I always figured they would, even like, was it 2 years ago, maybe or a year and a half ago, when it seemed like Ohio State was behind and had some stuff to figure out. And like, here we are. And it seems like they've gotten it figured out. Like that to me, I think is sort of like the hallmark of what Ohio State sort of has always been. It's like whatever is changing in the sport, whatever is laid out in front of them, whatever hurdle they have to get over to maintain their status as a preeminent program in college football, they do it. And because of that, they've not really had any prolonged stretch of not being relevant.
Let's do semantics, which is one of people's favorite things. Lawsuits and then semantics. Those are people's two favorite parts of college football. Indestructible Ohio State to me, I think, is more about foundational principles, which is tradition, which is resources, which is location, which is conference, size of fan base. Like it's the pillars of the fort you built, right? When you dug those post holes for your fort, you dug them deep. And now they're coming up, you're trying to get into the fort, and it's like, man, this fort is fortified. That's indestructible to me. So that's what we did in 2016, which is they're always there. They're never going away. I think the word that Evan is really describing here, and what you're describing, is adaptable. So once you're indestructible, then it's like, oh, well, these guys like to attack us this way, so we build a secret door. And these guys like to attack us this way, so we're going to sneak out of the fort and come in and outflank them. Like, we have the things that we do that make us indestructible. But as the world changes, we also adapt to the world. And so I think to be like, hey, in 2002, when the U is rolling and like, Ohio State found a way. In 2014, well, now there's a playoff and you get in. And well, Ohio State lost, but now they got to get into the playoff. And now you got to beat out. They found a way. Now in this world, we're going to go to 12 teams. You've got to beat 3 awesome teams to win it. And they do it. You find a way. That's adaptable to me. And I do think indestructible and adaptable are different. I think you certainly can be indestructible without being adaptable. It's like, we're always here, but we always do the same thing. You can probably be adaptable without being indestructible. That like sometimes you build a new door and sneak out the back, but then they still, like, you didn't dig the post holes deep enough. So they overrun your fort even while you're adapting. To be indestructible and adaptable, you're always there. And as the world changes, you find a way to win. It's a book title, Indestructible and Adaptable, 2024 Ohio State Buckeyes.
Also, it would be good for like a Tupperware collection.
Brought to you by Kings of the North. Do you need to keep your cheese curds ready for the tailgate? Try Indestructible and Adaptable Kings of the North Tupperware. Bill, how's your potato salad in your KOTN Tupperware?
I would do you've seen Napoleon Dynamite, right?
Yeah.
When they're selling Tupperware and Kit tries to back over the bowl with the van and then he just smashes it and drives away. It's like the funniest scene in the history of movies.
I've been thinking about a lot about like KOTN commercials, and I'm adding this to the list.
Yeah.
KOTN Tupperware. You smashed my cheese curds. So we've also, I think, talked about this. Ohio State hasn't had a super team. I think the Super Softs are a super team.
Yeah.
They're still like maybe on the early end, but like you like, hey, they did it as sophomores. If they would have done it again in 69, I'd be like, oh my God. Like that for sure would have been a super team. But I think you could quantify 68 as a super team. They just kind of ran over everybody. 2002 is not a super team. 2014, like NFL talent's not a super team, but they had to, I mean, like it's a talent super team in retrospect. In the moment, when you thought, I don't even know if they're going to get in the playoff because of that Virginia Tech loss. Oh, they won 59-0. I don't know that in the moment you would have seen them as a super team. So there also is on the table that like Ohio State just has a chance to have like the greatest have the greatest season they've ever had, to have the equivalent of what Michigan had last year, where it's like, oh, what's the greatest season in 130 years? Oh, is this one?
Yeah,
so
I think the
2019
team, had they won the national championship, I think would have been flirting with that because they like really kind of steamrolled through that regular season. The Penn State game, I think, was like kind of weird and close, but like almost all of them were pretty comfortable wins. But obviously they didn't finish off. So, but yeah, no, this would. I think you're like 14 was not 15. I think would have been the thing that made them that, but they didn't do that either.
Yeah.
So,
and I would not quantify Michigan last year as a super team, but I also think it's clearly the greatest season in Michigan history
for sure.
But you know, okay, good adjective discussion. One of my favorite things. So thanks for the question, Evan. Let's go to number 2. This is from our guy, the dude, who, sometimes you can just be the dude. Not sure how to phrase this question, but I'll give it a try. Not including the 22 players you expect to be starting on offense and defense, who are the next 22 you would expect to start, and how competitive do you think they would be in the Big Ten? With the exception of offensive line, they seem to be pretty deep everywhere else. So, okay, I did it. Anybody watching or listening to this, if you're moderately aware of Ohio State, you can do this. See if you disagree. Let's start on the defense with what the all 20, the backup starting 11 for the defense. So defensive end, Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry. Good with that. Defensive tackle, Hero Canoe and Caden McDonald.
Yeah, I think you can. It's Hero Canoe and pick another one. I think Caden McDonald's fine, reasonable.
Linebacker, CJ Hicks and Gabe Powers.
It's Gabe Powers, and then whichever of the two of Sonny Styles and CJ Hicks you think is not going to start. Technically,
you're keeping Sonny Styles off the field. You're planting your flag. Sonny Styles off the field.
No, I'm not. I'm not planting my flag, but we did CJ Hicks was a starting will linebacker in spring, so.
We were, we had prom in the family recently, the other weekend. And it was, took photos forever and forever. And, it was guys in and the girls out and then vice versa, whatever. And so they were trying to get one of the tall boys to get out of the photo. You're done, move over. And I said, Mutombo, out of the shot, which is what you just said. And all the kids were like, what? And it's Forgetting Sarah Marshall came out when they were 2. And I was like, you guys haven't seen Forgetting Sarah Marshall? And they were like, shut up, old man. Jason Segel is not a hip reference for high school kids.
They love that movie, though. It's an all-time great rom-com / raunchy comedy. It's tremendous.
But if some dad at my prom was making mash jokes, I would have been like, would you cram it? Can I just live my life? Tombo, out of the shot. Cornerback, Jermaine Matthews, Calvin Simpson, Hunt, and Lorenzo Styles?
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Yeah.
And then safety, Jaden Bonsu and Malik Hartford.
Yep.
Okay. So if we did that, that is 9 of those 11 starters would be top 200 national recruits, the backups. It would be 5 third-year players, 5 second-year players, and a fourth-year player. So from the defensive standpoint, and here's the thing, this is a playoff defense. They just happen to have an NFL defense stay
on top of it. Just scoop that layer of NFL defense off the top, and what do you have? Merely a playoff defense.
Merely a playoff defense. Jermaine Matthews is can we do this tomorrow? I'm ready. Kenyatta Jackson, we went through and did before spring football, guys to watch in spring football. And there were defensive ends that I was grabbing out of Iowa and Northwestern and stuff. I was like, hey, this guy. If Kenyatta Jackson was starting for Wisconsin, I would have driven to Madison to hang out with him. He's just sitting on Ohio State's bench. Yeah. So we're not to the full discussion yet, but what do you think of this defense?
Yeah, good. Really good, I think. That's not there's quite a few guys among that group who have, I think, really yet to prove it. And I would include Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry in that, even though they are guys who are going to be third-year players this year. And Hero Canoe is going to be a third-year player, but he's not really played. So there's enough unknown there to give a little bit of pause, I guess. But just trying to go off pure talent and recruiting pedigree, pretty good. Probably, I mean, on paper in this current Big Ten, at worst, the 5th best defense in the conference.
The part of it that I think is the most interesting is that there's veterans who just haven't had a chance yet. So the 5 third-year guys, their 24/7 composite ratings, the third-year guys, they were the number 60, number 123, number 129, number 101, and number 7 players in the country. They are in their 3rd year of college football, and they're backups at Ohio State. Yeah. So pretty good. Let's do offense before we determine where we think this group would finish in the Big Ten. This is harder, as the dude pointed out. Offensive line. This is my offense. let me run through quick. Left tackle, George Fitzpatrick. Left guard, Austin Saraveld. Center, Josh Padilla. Right guard, Carson Hinsman. Right tackle, Tegra Shabola. Because I put Montgomery in the starting lineup.
Yeah, I think you could do that, or you could do Carson Hinsman at center and then put Zen Mohovsky at right tackle and Tegra at guard.
Okay.
But I actually like your configuration better. If you're doing like a best 5 exercise, that's probably the way to do it.
Okay. Running back is I put Travion Henderson. You put Quinshon Judkins, right? They have 2 running backs, so you put one of them there. The receivers: Jaden Ballard, Brandon Innes, Bryson Rogers.
Yep. I think you probably can't say this yet because I don't even think he's here yet. But like if we had the same conversation in like September, Mylan Graham maybe would be in that conversation. But
yeah. Tight end Jelani Thurman, get him on the field, or you could do who's left of Will Kazmarek and G. Scott, who I assume one of those 2 will be the actual starter. But I wanted to get Jelani on the field.
Yeah, I would pick Jelani. Yeah,
and then who you playing a quarterback?
Well, I guess.
Here's the threshold. You're a team. You're trying to be the best team you can be. You can take anybody on the Ohio State roster except the 22 starters.
Who's not a starter?
So who are you starting at quarterback?
Julian Sayin.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So we'll roll. It's like, we'll figure it out. We're good.
Yeah.
So overall, that's clearly questions on the offensive line.
Absolutely.
And you're starting a true freshman at quarterback, except Nebraska's starting a true freshman at quarterback. And we're like, are they going to go 11-1? So that's that. I think it's possible the Ohio State backup team would compete with Penn State to be the 4th best team in the Big Ten.
Oh, yeah, I can get there.
Ohio State starters 1, Oregon 2, Michigan 3. And then we start thinking about the Ohio State backups.
I think that's right. Yeah, and Penn State has talent, right? Maybe it's more likely that Ohio State's backups are 5th, but I think I'd watch the game. I would want to watch the game.
I mean, like Penn State has some dudes, right? I mean, Denai Dennis Sutton and Abdul Carter and some of the guys they're going to put out there defensively are like, okay, well, they would be the best players in the game against the Ohio State backups.
I'd rather have that Ohio State offense than Penn State's offense.
I mean, if Julian Fleming had stayed, he would be on the Ohio State backup team probably, and instead he's Penn State's #1 receiver. Now, and yes, Penn State has 2 great running backs, but the Ohio State backups are going to hand the ball to Travion Henderson 27 times a game, so they're good.
Yeah, or
and like,
Dawkins. Yeah, either one.
And depending when the game is played, I'm higher on Drew Aller than some people are. Late October, would you want Drew Aller or would you want Julian Sayin with his feet under him?
I would want Julian Sayin without his feet under him. So I'll definitely take him with his feet under him.
So it makes us sound like Scarlet Glasses Homer lunatics when you say something like, I think the Ohio State backups would be the 11 seed in the playoff. It does. We understand that. But this is a unique year because there's about 8 or 9 guys on this backup team that thought they were going to be starting this year, that have developed, were recruited, have developed, have enough experience and talent to be quality Ohio State starters. They are ready to do that. It's just the Buckeyes kept 8 guys that had NFL decisions.
Yeah.
And so it's not dissimilar to the 2015 discussion of could Ohio State beat the Browns, which was just like First of all, like 2015, Ohio State had trouble with Northern Illinois, so probably not beat the Browns. But then also when you look at the Browns in 2015 and you look at 2015 Ohio State, it's like, I don't know. I know it's whatever, but like, are you sure? If you would have really played that game, did the Browns have anybody as good as Ezekiel Elliott, Joey Bosa, Darren Lee, Michael Thomas, Taylor Decker, Billy Price? Like, for real? Like, you can. So it can sound, in theory, these kind of discussions can feel insulting.
Mm-hmm.
In certain circumstances, when you dig into it, it's like, fourth.
Well, I mean, another way to do it, and like not to spend too much time on the question, but it's like you could just go position group by position group, right? And like that trio of receivers is the third best in the Big Ten, right? If you do Ohio State starters and then probably Oregon and then Ohio State's backups.
Yeah. Those starters are better than Michigan.
Yeah, better than Penn State. I think Penn State would trade its top three receivers for Jaden Ballard, Bryson Rodgers, and Brandon Inniss right now.
Yeah. If Brandon Inniss was sitting on a competitive Big Ten team, we'd be like, watch out for this guy. This guy could be the guy who gets this team over the top for the playoff.
Yeah.
And for Ohio State, it's like, maybe he'll get some garbage time snaps when Becca's tired.
Yeah. So I think like if you went to every team in the Big Ten and said you have to start true freshman Julian Sayin as your quarterback, Oregon would probably say no. Penn State might say no. Michigan State might say no because they have Aiden Childs. And then I think the rest of the conference was like, yep, okay, no problem.
Yep.
Or I guess Nebraska. Nebraska has Dylan Raiola, but
it's the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like Nebraska is doing that and is fired up about it. And he looked good in the spring game, and we think they're going to be good. So, okay. Like you can't do this exercise every year. Like a year from now, the Ohio State backups won't be the fourth best team in the Big Ten because there's going to be a sweeping. Well, they're going to have a bunch of new starters who've been backups, and then the guys behind them are not going to be the same thing. Yeah. But it's a weird little thing, which is why it was a great question from the dude.
And the offensive, the offensive line would be like a gigantic question. We can't go through an entire offseason with questions about the starting offensive line and just like the backup offensive line. Like, they're fine.
We're like, Austin Saravel, they got it. George Fitzpatrick, it's all good. It's all good.
They're great.
We're moving the pocket.
We are definitely moving the pocket. Yeah.
All right. This is from Steven. This is football stuff, so you do the work here. Rank in order from least to most likely what potential lineups and formations we could see next season. He listed 6. 2 running backs, 4 or more receivers, 4 or more linebackers, 2 quarterbacks, woohoo! The jack, and 2 punt returners. So what do you think is the thing we will see the most? 2 quarterbacks, right? You got to get Sayin and Howard on the field to get them. What will we see the most? Devin Brown is like an offset little like Will Howard playing a little H-back while Devin's taking the snap? No, not first.
I think they're too similar. Just like the Spider-Man meme with 2 guys pointing at each other.
That's the formation. Hut, they turn, they point at each other. The ball is snapped. They fight over the ball, and you don't know who has it. What will we see the most of those? Is it the jack?
No, I think it's 2 running backs.
So if you think we will see some decent chunk of 2 running backs, what does that mean to you?
Well, I just think like Chip Kelly did a decent amount of it at UCLA, and I think you're going to embrace the opportunities to put Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson on the field together. And that's not necessarily to say that like Chip Kelly's going to want to use Quinshon Judkins as a fullback because I don't. You don't want to expose him in that kind of way too much. But I think just putting them both on the field and not tipping your hand as to which direction their run play is going to go, part of Ohio State's issue, I think, over the last couple of years with its rushing attack has been like when it has been in the shotgun, and it's true for everybody. It's like that's why Ryan Day likes the pistol so much. It's like when you're in the shotgun more often than not, you are running to the opposite side of the running back. And Chip Kelly does a really good job of like running to the same side of the running back sometimes to mix that up and keep defenses honest. But another way to do it is line up in the shotgun with split backs, and then you don't know which way the play is going. You can try to key off the tight end, I suppose, but Chip Kelly is really good about dressing some of that stuff up too. So it's just like creativity. I don't know that it means like totally unfamiliar run schemes or brand new stuff that we haven't seen before. But I just think Chip Kelly is the kind of person that when he has that ability at his disposal, he's going to use it. So I think we'll see. You're not going to see it every down, but I think you'll see an uptick in it at Ohio State, and an uptick in it means like doing it even once a game, because they just haven't. I don't know that they've done it really since Mike Weber and Curtis Samuel, and even then they didn't do it a ton.
I just am curious in their mind, is two great running backs, is that an insurance policy to make sure they have one great running back on the field every snap in a 15 game season? Or is it, let's be diverse and interesting and keep defenses off balance? And I'm more inclined to think that they just want to keep them fresh, and that's how they'll use these two guys. And then let's get to a playoff semifinal, and all of a sudden, hey, Georgia, Judkins and Henderson are on the field together. But
that could be the case. Yeah. No, I could see that being the case. And I would also, this is like kind of fudging it a little bit, but like I would consider a formation where you have like Emeka Egbuka and Travion Henderson in the backfield as a two-back set, or Brandon Ennis and Quinshon Judkins in the backfield as a two-back set. So I think you might see some of that too. And I think that's probably not what he meant with the question. I think he actually meant like Travion and Quinshon on the field together. But I do think you'll see like more split back stuff in this offense generally.
Okay. So that's first. Is the Jack second?
I don't know. I am reluctant to embrace the idea of the Jack because I've been hurt too many times already. So I did not have that second. I actually had the 4 or more wide receiver sets second, which I realize might sound counterintuitive if I'm saying like they're going to play a lot with two backs, and they say they're going to play a lot with 4 or 5 receivers. It's just like Chip Kelly is so game plan and opponent specific that I think it does open up the opportunities for both of those ideas to coexist, right? And it's not, they don't necessarily have to be in place of one another. Like I just think like maybe one week he'll say like, hey, we can go 4 wide and attack this team this way this week, and then next week we're going to go 22 personnel and attack this team this way. I really do think it could change somewhat drastically week to week what Ohio State looks like on offense, which then opens up the opportunity for the top 2 things in this list to be both 2 running backs and 4 or 5 wide receiver sets, and different from what we've seen in the past, right? Not the stuff that you always say when Ohio State goes 5 wide, it's 3 receivers, a tight end, and a running back. Like I truly think like actual receivers on the field.
And both your answers there are Chip Kelly related.
Yeah.
Chip Kelly will bring that in, explain to Ryan Day why this could work, and they'll sprinkle it in a way that they just have not ever consistently sprinkled it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Third is the Jack.
Well, I guess let me ask you a clarifying question. The 4 or more linebackers thing, does that mean 4 or more linebackers playing regularly, or 4 or more linebackers on the field at the same time? Because
that to me is the Justin Hilliard set, right? When they were playing Justin Hilliard as a 4th linebacker on the field.
Yeah. Okay.
Several years ago.
Well, in that case, then like that and the Jack are kind of similar, I would say, because if there is a Jack on the field, it could be like CJ Hicks. So I guess I would combine the 2 and like put that third, or if I have to separate them, I guess I would say Jack third and 4 line. I don't know how often they're going to play with 4 linebackers,
because that was their look, right? That when Justin Hilliard kind of jumped up and had a real role a couple of years ago, and they used him. They played that like against Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's a good goal line defense. Yeah,
but they played it. I mean, weren't there games where Justin Hilliard went from playing like 8 snaps to playing 42 snaps in some games because they were they really had like situationally. So like, could they do that against Iowa this season? Right.
Yeah, probably.
That they move to a look where you have Hicks, Styles, Simon, and Powers together. You go to like a 3-4, and 4 DBs, and you're pulling the slot corner. You're pulling the slot corner off the field, and you're pulling one of the defensive tackles off the field, right? Or something, or you're probably not going to, but you have that kind of look where you want linebackers filling gap against heavy personnel run teams.
Yeah,
So
I mean that's we know that that's in the arsenal, I think, for Jim Knowles. So they'll do that sometimes. And again, it's another like semantics conversation. It's because Jim Knowles talked about maybe wanting to do some like 3-down bare front stuff that like Virginia Tech did against Ohio State back in 2014, and having Jack and JT be like essentially outside linebackers. Does that count for this idea? Probably not, but that would technically be like a 3-4 defense, to your point. So, yeah, but then that you can also say like, no, that's just the Jack package. Like, so I don't know. Like, it's kind of all one idea to me, I think, depending on how you want it to deploy it. Like the Justin Hilliard stuff is not. That's more of like just like a heavy goal line kind of personnel package. But then when you start talking about like 3-4 stand-up edge rushers that are outside linebackers, that's more like Jack adjacent, I think.
But so to me, if it's the Jack has to be moving around. So you can have, if you have a 3-4 look where you have stand-up linebackers on the edge, to me, the way Jim Knowles has explained it is, if you're the Jack, you're finding gaps. You and Jim Knowles are synchronized like Avatar, and he's in your mind, and you're floating in a way to disrupt the offense.
Yeah, that is the idea of the position, which has created some confusion, I think, over Jim Knowles' tenure here, because I think there have been times where like a defensive end just happens to be standing up and people are like, oh, that's the Jack. It's like, no, that's just JT Tuimoloau deciding he wants to stand up on that play. Jim Knowles calls it like a float player. Like it was Leo and now it's the Jack or whatever, but he's like, I've seen him in coaches clinics call it the float player, which is like, he's just a directed weapon wherever you want him to go. But sometimes that is standing up on the end of the line of scrimmage too, which I realize is probably confusing. But philosophically, like the idea, I think you are correct that it is a specific job assignment that is not always just standing up on the edge of the end of the line of scrimmage.
All right, so then that's down to 2 quarterbacks and 2 punt returners. A change in special teams, could they become a team that puts 2 punt returners back there? Do you think that's at all possible? They haven't been that, right?
I think it's possible. I think it's certainly more possible than playing 2 quarterbacks. 2 quarterbacks is a distant last for me on this list. And I would put 2 punt returners.
Only if you want to win. Only play 2 quarterbacks if you want to win and simultaneously revolutionize the sport and go down in history as one of the 5 most important minds. It's like Sid Luckman and Bill Walsh and Rich Rodriguez, or I don't know, whoever we're going to give the spread credit to, and the guy who puts 2 quarterbacks on. You don't want to be that? Oh, you don't want to invent the West Coast offense? You don't want to move your sport forward? You don't want to be like a spaceman dropped from the future and blow everybody's mind? You don't want to do that? You don't want to be the Fosbury Flop? Oh, let's go over the bar with our foot. No, let's turn our backs and go over head first. What? You don't want to be that? Fine. When I have my 5th grade youth football team, we will be playing 2 quarterbacks.
You can do it when the video game comes out. You can just get the video game and put a quarterback at tailback.
Do you think that? Well, I'll talk to some people. All right, so that's our list. You think generally they will be more formationally creative than the past because of the arrival of Chip Kelly and perhaps because of Jim Knowles being in year 3 and having a bunch of veteran dudes?
Yeah, I think just like less static personnel wise than they have been. Yeah, formationally, like the formations may like look the same, but different people in different places, perhaps at times.
Okay. All right, this is from Miguel. What do you guys think will happen first? A 12 seed or lower, if more teams are added, wins the college football playoff, or a 12 seed or lower wins the men's NCAA basketball championship? So I do think that caveat is an important one. 12 seed or lower when they expand, because they're already going to expand to 14. I don't think a 12 seed, because the 12 seed currently in the playoff is the group of 5 best champion.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is a very interesting discussion to be had about when is the first time we will see that team, whether it's a 12 seed or 14 seed. When will we see the first group of 5 win in the playoff, knock off the 5 seed, right? I think we will see that someday. I don't think we'll ever see him win it all. Like it's 4. You're going to beat 4 straight banger teams with more talent than you to win a national championship. So I have to take the basketball thing because it's never going to happen in football. We're having a can they win one game conversation. They will never win it all. Ever.
Yeah.
Ever.
I mean, it's so we've I think, well, to address the basketball thing first, right? Like 11 seeds have made the Final Four. It's happened 6 times. It happened this year. So like we've been close. The sport lends itself more to that too. And I think you're right about the G5 thing. The only thing, like with like the NIL stuff and like the ability to like kind of buy a roster now, is there ever going to be a time where like some crazy billionaire of a G5 alum is like, you know what? We're going for it. And like, we're just loading up this roster with a bunch of guys that would never be playing G5 football otherwise. Like, kind of like Dion didn't quite do this at Jackson State, but like Dion built like a roster that you just like really couldn't compete against when he was at Jackson State because he was Dion. Like, is there a way to do that at the G5 level for like a year to really make a run at something? I think that's how it could happen, but that's also probably unlikely to ever take shape.
Yeah, and then there reaches a point where it's like, well, then if that team got in, they were undefeated and got in and were actually awesome, they'd probably beat the 7 seed, so like they wouldn't even be the 12. Because
that's true. That's true.
The group of 5 team doesn't have to be. So I mean, it's one.
Yeah.
So now, if the question is, so when you expand it to, okay, now 12 seed or lower, well, now in a 14 team playoff world, the 12 and the 13 seed are just going to be like the 4th best team in the SEC or the 4th best team in the Big Ten or the 2nd best team in the ACC. Could that team? Yeah, absolutely. Like, you just have a team that had like a little bit of a weird thing. Like, there are all kinds of versions. I think the one people reference a lot is the Sam Darnold USC team in what was the year? 2017?
When they played Ohio State? 17?
No, the year before that, when they beat Penn State in the Rose Bowl. 16.
2016.
When Penn State should have gone to the playoff and didn't. And then Penn State was good, beat Wisconsin, came back and beat Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game. Banger Penn State USC Rose Bowl. USC, which had a rough start, beat Penn State. Like, that kind of team, if that's the conversation we're having, that's definitely more likely. So if it's not only a group of 5, it's just a power conference team, more likely than not from the SEC or Big Ten, that had a couple early season losses and then got their stuff together and all of a sudden are in with 3 losses, but they've been playing awesome in November. 100% that's going to happen.
Yeah, that USC team started the year by losing to number 1 Alabama, beat Utah State, then lost to a top 10 Stanford team and lost to Utah. So they were 1-4 and then didn't lose the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And beat a couple of ranked teams on the way. Yeah. But they were they were 9th by the time they got to the postseason. So I don't know what that team would be seed wise, but that's the profile, I think.
That's the profile of how it works. But it's just that's the way it's gonna work. All right. Last one.
You know who that team will be? Ohio State.
No. Yeah. I mean,
it's like 2032 Ohio State as a 12 seed.
Like unless it's 2024 Ohio State that goes to Oregon, loses, makes a quarterback switch, takes a little time to get their feet under them, loses to Penn State, takes a little time to get their feet under them, loses to Michigan on a last-second field goal and is 9-3 and squeaks in as the 11 seed. And then Julian Sand is like, let's go! And it wouldn't be the 12 seed this year, but it's the 11 seed. Like that 11 seed, 9-3 Ohio State in as the 4th Big Ten team behind Oregon, Michigan, and Penn State, but with their stuff together.
Yeah.
Let's just do the rest of the pot on that. You want to do the rest of the pot on that? We started off with The Ohio State backups are the 4th best team in the Big Ten. And now we've moved to, what if Ohio State starters are the 4th best team in the Big Ten? Could they win the national championship? Off-season pods. Let's go to our guy, Matt in California. What do you guys think the odds are that Quinshon Judkins surpasses TreVeyon Henderson as the clear RB1 by the Oregon game? Trey needs to get his 12 to 15 touches a game, but as an every down back, I would think Quinshon's consistent production should or will outweigh Trey's boom or bust style. What do you think, Landis?
I kind of agree. I think that by like mid-year, it'll be pretty clear that Quinshon is the guy who should be getting more carries. And I don't like less carries for TreVeyon to me, like isn't necessarily like less of a workload than he's been accustomed to. I would just like to see him get involved as a receiver more than he has been. But there's a durability and a physicality with Quinshon Judkins that just frankly doesn't exist with TreVeyon Henderson that I think just becomes more reliable over the course of a long season. So I do think there will come a time where it will feel like Quinshon Judkins is the number 1 running back, but not in a way that it's like TreVeyon becomes an afterthought. Like I don't want it to come off that way. Like I do think they are both very much a part of what this offense is for the entirety of the season. But if it starts off as like an even workload, I think eventually Quinshon will end up pulling away and end up having more carries.
I have a Post-it note. They could make it into a banner if they want. They have graphics people who could do this. You can hang it in the running backs room. You can hang it in Ryan Day's office. You can hang it in the team meeting room if you want to. And it says, "Get Trey to Christmas." And I think there's a discussion that is, who's the better running back in this situation? Who's the 3rd and 1 running back this year for Ohio State?
Judkins.
So there are things like that. Okay, who's the, you know what, this drive that's pound some people, running back for Ohio State?
Judkins.
Okay, so like there's that discussion, and then there's the TreVeyon Henderson is really good. Sometimes it has been difficult for him to be healthy at the end of a season. It would help us win the national championship if he were healthy for the end of the season. So how can we do that? You could be in a world where it's not that Quinshon is better or deserves more carries. It's that, Trey, we're going to make sure we get you to when you can get us over the top. But I also think the other argument could also happen too, that actually Quinshon might be stylistically, just from his skill set, more positioned to be that guy. So it's 2 reasons for Matt's theory to perhaps play out. Yeah.
But I still kind of think they're both going to rush for 1,000 yards.
We'll do that. We'll do over-unders. We'll do like stat predictions. I don't disagree with that. Unless
or like close to it, maybe. Close to it, yeah.
I mean, this is another one. Like the discussion about like, let's get TreVeyon involved in the passing game. Let's let Quinshon Judkins run for 1,350 and have Trey run for 900 and have 400 receiving. Right. Yeah. But that might be in our imaginations, not a reality.
Yeah.
So, okay. Quick break. When we come back, perhaps a public apology from me next on Kings of Columbus. Back on Kings of Columbus. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis. Bill, we had our first Kings of the North this week with special guest Adam Rittenberg that we recorded on Tuesday. And we had this discussion that was partly based on some answers that tech subscribers sent many weeks ago that I sent out. Like, how are you feeling about college football? Do you think it's getting better or worse? And we used some of those texter answers on Kings of the North because we have such a good relationship with our Ohio State Tech subscribers. And in questions like this, I think they are fairly representative of college football fans across the board. I enjoyed it. I thought we had a good discussion about player compensation, about the national championship, about regular old Saturdays in the fall. And I hope it was enlightening for people a little bit, because don't you feel like it can get a little doom and gloomy with the off-season discussions around college football this year?
Yeah, it definitely can. And I didn't feel like our conversation was. But it was also like, not to undermine our own expertise, but you and I are just kind of like two guys talking about stuff. And Adam's like, I talked to this athletic director and this coach and this athletic director and this conference commissioner. It's like, oh, these are good perspectives to have in a conversation like this. So that made it a little deeper, I think better for everybody.
Well, we'll get there. Listen, once once Kings of the North is really rolling, people will be like running off the street to talk to us. But Adam's always like, I'm sure you guys talk to a bunch of athletic directors too. And I'm like, oh yeah, constant.
Yeah, of course we did. Yeah.
I just kind of think what I think with no backing. But it was a good conversation. We also had Amanda Kristovich on, who is a sports business writer for Front Office Sports, who really has a handle on this, wrote a gigantic story this week that kind of dropped the bomb about the lobbying efforts by the NCAA to be like, hey, Congress, let's make sure we don't pay players, like the players that we supposedly represent. It's like, okay. Well. So I thought there are some people who just don't care about that. And I keep saying, you're allowed to not care about it. But if you do care about it, as Amanda said, like, this is as about as interesting of a time as there could be, because the whole sport is changing and there's more stuff happening this week with conferences voting on this proposed settlement to give back damages to former college football players, which is like a $2 billion settlement. And I just don't want to do too much of that, but we had to check in on it. So that was Kings of the North on Tuesday. We would invite you, if you enjoy Kings of Columbus, we just would say, try Kings of the North and see what you think, because that program is growing and will continue to do so. And we also want to mention that we can't do this show without our tech subscribers. If you want to be a tech subscriber, 614-662-4509. You can text anything to that number. You'll get back a link to sign up. You get 2 weeks for a free trial to see what you think. And then you can sign up if you want to. And then you get information from us and we do surveys and that kind of stuff. It's the off season. I think there's value in the offseason because it's like, maybe you're not otherwise thinking about Ohio State football. It's like, hey, my phone, I got a little note from Bill. But if also you want to wait and do it in preseason camp or Big Ten Media Days in July, like, that's cool too. We get it. So, but yeah, all these,
just to add on to the plug, recruiting camp season is coming up in a couple weeks too. Wouldn't it be a bad time maybe to jump on?
Yeah. Bermy will be sending some knowledge. Mm-hmm. And all the things that we're using today are from our tech subscribers. So thanks to those who do subscribe and ask me things like this from Drew in New York. Is Doug willing to make a public apology about Josh Simmons yet? I remember him doing a pod last year saying it was one of the biggest failures during his time on the Ohio State beat that Simmons was in position to be the starting left tackle. Seems like Simmons has been pretty solid. Drew in Manhattan. No. Next question. That's it for Doug's Apology Corner here on Kings of Columbus. So he was not a disaster. Fair?
Yeah.
Josh Simmons was not a disaster.
I have some stuff I looked up on that. You want to?
Did you look it up to reinforce my position last year, or did you look it up to reinforce the fact that you think I should apologize for my position?
Honestly, just out of curiosity, because I don't think I had actually gone and looked it up, and it's not like a ringing endorsement necessarily of Josh Simmons. Power 5 tackles last year with at least 800 blocking snaps. So 57 players qualified. Josh Simmons was 32nd. Josh Fryer was 13th.
I also looked up some stats in support of my apology or / not apology. Last year, so this was a Power 5.
That was offensive grades by PFF, by the way. I don't think I said that.
Yeah. So the left tackles by that standard, right? It was like 50% or more of your snaps, Power 5, Power 4 now, tackles. Mm-hmm. Paris Johnson by that threshold in 2022 was 6th. And I'm just talking left. It's all tackles, left and right. I just focused on the Ohio State left tackles, where they ranked among all tackles. Mm-hmm. Paris Johnson, 6th, 2021, Nicholas Petit Frere, 28th. 2020, 2019, 2018, Thayer Munford, 4th, 25th, 65th. Okay. And again, Josh Simmons by my threshold was 56th. So it is a big drop from Paris Johnson. It's a big drop from Nicholas Petit-Frere. It's a big drop from the best of experience Thayer Munford. It's a drop from what Taylor Decker was in 14 and 15. It's a drop. My biggest thing was like, how does Ohio State get in a position where our left tackle is San Diego State's starting right tackle from last year? Like, that's how you go about this? That's insane to me. I have not changed my mind on that. Was he better than I expected? Yes. He allowed 10 hurries, that's pretty good to only allow 10 hurries. He did have 8 penalties, which is kind of a lot, and it dings him in PFF, but it's less than 1 per game. Only allowed 1 sack.
Half of what he had the year before.
It is. So, like, one of the things when you think of, not to be mean, but when you think of like disastrous tackle play at Ohio State, is there something that springs to mind?
Isaiah Prince.
Okay. So Isaiah Prince's senior year, he had 17 penalties. That led the nation. Josh Simmons last year had 8. He allowed 18 hurries that year. Isaiah Prince did. Josh Simmons last year had 10, and he allowed 3 sacks. Josh Simmons allowed 1. I thought that type of year, lead the nation in penalties, give up a boatload of hurries, kind of blow up the offense, was on the table. And that did not happen. That did not happen. It almost is like, and at the end of the year, not being able to sustain a block on the final Kyle McCord interception was sort of the nail in the coffin for Ohio State. It wasn't Josh Simmons, right? Yeah. So he was better than I thought he would be, and he deserves credit for that. I don't think he was good. I think he was fine.
Yeah.
He wasn't a disaster. I still think there are like, give me like a real dude with the toolbox and some moves. And I am still going into 2024 uncertain about Josh Simmons. I still think if Ohio State is going to be in the business of finding left tackles on the San Diego State roster, it is not going to work long-term. So that was awful. Credit to Josh Simmons for being fine and not being a guy who did not allow Ohio State to have a successful season. When you say, hey, why didn't Ohio State make the playoff last year? I don't like Josh Simmons is not super high on that list, is he? If we're going individual people for like blame, he's not in the top 5.
No, we didn't talk about him all that much last year, which I think is like kind of a credit to him, right?
Exactly.
He had the one like penalty. I can't remember which game it was. It like wiped a touchdown off the board, but then I think like Ohio State scored on like the next play or something. So there just wasn't, there wasn't a lot of disastrous tackle play out there. It was like, I think it was probably like Big Ten average tackle play is how I would describe it. But you also want Ohio State to be better than Big Ten average. So.
But and also like where is Ohio State Big Ten average in anything?
Right. Yeah.
That's not the Ohio State standard.
Yeah.
So my sounding the alarm, I hope that's not why I did it. Hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to get everybody to panic. So if he's fine, you'll be excited. Maybe that should be my thing. I'm the panic guy. Oh my God. Oh, it's fine. Oh, I feel great about fine. You don't feel great about fine in regards to anything else with Ohio State football. Hey, how's it going with the Buckeyes? That's fine. Oh,
yeah.
Average Big Ten? Let's roll. No, nobody thinks that. So I will apologize to Josh Simmons for not believing he would be as good as he was. I won't apologize to Ohio State for thinking if this is your left tackle plan, you're in for trouble.
Yeah.
And I guess you got away with it.
It's process and result, right? Like, the result worked, but the process was flawed, but you got an okay answer. But repeat that process 10 times and eight times probably will blow up in your face.
Do you think, is it fair to say that when we think about the tackles, and they're named Josh, and there was even controversy about who should be called Josh early last year, that Fryer was the better tackle early and Simmons was the better tackle late? Is that right? Is that a fair?
I think that is correct. But I was going to say that maybe the best we saw from Fryer was slightly better than the best we saw from Simmons, but that might not be the case. Josh Fryer's grades are really good. Which like
PFF loved him.
They really loved him last year, and that's why I try not to throw out PFF grades as like gospel in the end all be all.
Yeah.
But, grade wise, like Josh Fryer was significantly better than Josh Simmons. I don't know that I saw that with my eyes, but I would agree with you that first part of the year Fryer was better, second part of the year Simmons was better, and Simmons like was felt like Simmons was on like an upward trajectory kind of for most of the season. Not that like by the end he was a rock star, but I think probably game to game better as opposed to Josh Fryer, who seemed to slip at the end of the year.
So I will say this, you guys can cut and save this. If you need it, you could make it your ringtone. You could play it on a loop on your phone, like make it a GIF. I'm sorry. I was wrong. So just cut and paste that, and then I won't have to ever say it again because it's probably going to be used a lot.
I'm gonna use that as my sleep sound now.
Just pop an edible and listen to Doug apologize. Yeah. All right, let's do a little Cruton. This is from Ty. How much does Ohio State value the in-state prospect anymore as the game and the program have become more national? On the flip side, how much does an in-state prospect value going to Ohio State? Let's do the second part first. In-state prospect value going to Ohio State still pretty high, in your opinion?
I think still very high. If there was a way to quantify it, perhaps lower than it was 15 years ago, because other programs are just like infinitely more reachable than they were, like via social media and whatever. So, but yeah, still quite high. Yeah.
And I think that applies to everything in society. There was a time where like your hometown, home state thing and it was it. And then everything became nationalized and everything became a chain. And there used to only be Hard Rock cafes in New York and London. And now there are Hard Rock cafes in Fort Wayne. And so there's a Hard Rock cafe in Fort Wayne. Maybe you don't want to go to Ohio State, right?
Yeah. It's a good analogy. Yeah.
Ohio State valuing in-state prospects. I mean, this has been I've been doing this almost 20 years. This is a constant conversation. And I think I would say it's trended back toward some more in-state value. I think we probably hit a peak in the Urban Meyer era of even though Urban would say, make the great state of Ohio proud. He was like, make the great state of Ohio proud. But man, is that guy in Georgia good, which is, how you win national titles. Because guess who's not from Ohio? Ezekiel Elliott and Eli Apple and Joey Bosa and a bunch of dudes. Mm-hmm. But it feels like Ryan Day has said this publicly, right? In the NIL era, like if you're trying to re-recruit your roster every offseason to have some in-state guys on the roster who aren't going to maybe be as inclined to leave if they don't play right away, who want to be here through thick and thin, I think the value of in-state players has increased for Ohio State as a result. Yes,
I think that's right. I mean, I remember that being a big deal when Ryan Day first got the job, and I wrote a story about it. And this is not the greatest example, I guess, in hindsight, but like when they took Trey LaRue in the 2020 class, it was just like Urban Meyer would never have taken Trey LaRue.
Yeah.
Just wasn't going to happen. And in hindsight, maybe Ryan Day shouldn't have either, because it ended up just kind of being a roster spot that never amounted to much. But like that 2020 class, when he took a bunch of in-state offensive linemen who were lower rated and you hoped like one of them might pop. They weren't all from Ohio, but they were all in the Midwest. A couple of them were from Ohio. I think that felt more like a Tressel kind of thing, right? That felt more like an old school Ohio State kind of thing that I don't think Urban was particularly interested in. And I think there's always going to be a balance there. Like that's really like the only time Ohio State has done something like that in Ryan Day's tenure, like really loaded up with that kind of prospect, particularly at one position. But I do think generally they are, they have more of an eye on Ohio probably than Urban's staff did. I think because of all the reasons you laid out there, but not all the way back to what it was like prior to Urban. I don't think we'll ever see that again. I don't. It goes back to the conversation we had at the start of the show about like being adaptable. I think part of adapting is realizing that, right? You have to be more national to be competitive nationally. So, but I don't know that they value them any less. I think they're just more selective maybe than they used to be. If that makes sense.
And I do feel like maybe they're giving a few more ties to the Ohio guys, right? I mean, if you look at the continuum of valuing national players versus Ohio players, right? Coop took it national. And as a result, there were some really good Ohio players who wound up not playing at Ohio State, wound up playing at Michigan. So that was, okay, Coop's national, but he's losing some Ohio guys. Tressel comes in, builds a fence around Ohio, but is not getting as many national guys at all, not getting top-tier national guys. Urban comes in, takes it national again. Okay, he's going to do what he did at Florida, where he had like the #1 player in 9 different states at Florida. They take it national. And now I think, as we find with so many answers about Ryan Day has not swung it back to Tressel, but Ryan Day is somewhere in between Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer.
Yes.
In this and in practically everything else. That it's more Ohio than Urban, but more national than Tress at the same time.
Yeah.
So,
but this will be I'm assuming, I don't want to put words in Ty's mouth, but I'm assuming this question is being asked because of what's happening in this cycle with a couple of Ohio prospects. Like, and Berm has talked about this on Talking Stuff, which you should go listen to because he's far more, way more of an expert on recruiting than either of us are. Like Trey McNutt, maybe not, I say not in the best position with him, like Bo Jackson, the running back from Cleveland, like really liking, I think it's Alabama. Justin Hill, the end down in Cincinnati, is like Oregon and Georgia are coming in. It just feels like it's felt like forever that if Ohio State wanted a player in Ohio, they were going to get them. And there are a couple in this cycle who it does seem like Ohio State wants that they might not get. And that's a little weird.
Yeah. Ask Berm. No, but I mean, I think, like, we're never going to be able to do the nitty gritty. I mean, that's why Berm is Berm. But like, there's some philosophical stuff that I think is always interesting. And again, there's still, I mean, the times when Ohio State didn't get a big time dude in the state, Jackson Carman, right? Jordan Hicks. I mean, we're going way back for this stuff. And it was like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. Right. It was such. Yeah. And so if we would somehow, whatever, Liam Eichenberg went to Notre Dame, but that was a Catholic high school. And that's always a little bit different. Tommy's brother, but like that, there's if we would get to a point where it becomes normalized again for Ohio State to have interest in a guy who's one of the top 5 players in the state and not get him, if that becomes normalized, that would be a thing, right? That would be like, that
would be a thing. Yeah.
It's not normalized right now, right?
It would also depend on what the counter to that in the class is too. I think, right? If you don't get Trey McNutt from Shaker Heights as a safety, they're like, okay, who's the safety you got instead of him? And then, like, if it's a, I don't know, 5-star kid from Georgia, then it's like, okay.
That used to be the only conversation, but then the conversation is 1 year in, did you make sure that the 5-star kid from Georgia who didn't start as a freshman, is he still here?
Yeah.
Or did he now leave and Trey McNutt is starting at some other place because, or your Georgia safety leaves after a year because he didn't start. Trey McNutt leaves after a year because he didn't start, and you wind up with Trey McNutt anyway.
Yeah, right? You get Trey McNutt, and Georgia gets the guy that you got from Georgia. Yeah.
Which is just how everything might work these days.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Georgia. This is from Jeff. Georgia fans now give me the vibe of the Golden State Warrior fans in the second half of last decade, a team that historically was a non-factor in the title hopes that managed to build a dynasty. And now they act like they run the sport and are so high and mighty. I wonder if there is such a name for a mentality as this. Here's the real question. Why should Ohio State fans care what Georgia fans think when they are acting so high and mighty, when arguably, historically speaking, Ohio State is more of a college football powerhouse than Georgia? First of all, it's not arguable. Ohio State is more of a college football powerhouse than Georgia historically. I'll throw this in real quick as another note from a good texter, Lee. And we just need to include this. Lee says he lives less than 2 hours from Athens, Georgia. Lee, our texter. So this is great information. He said Berm was correct when he said he didn't think Georgia or its fans view Ohio State as a rival in recruiting or anything else for that matter. I go back and forth with some Georgia fans, and until Ohio State beats Georgia head-to-head on a big stage, I don't think it will ever change as long as Kirby is there. The best comparison I can think of is the way Ohio State views Penn State. Good competition, a little dangerous maybe, but 95% sure they are going to win every time they play. I thought that was a fascinating piece of input from Lee. Let's do this first. What do you think of Georgia is to Ohio State as Ohio State is to Penn State?
It's a little difficult.
SAT
yeah,
question.
It's a little difficult for me because Ohio State and Penn State played every year for what, 21 years or something like that, right? And
Yep.
how many times have Ohio State, like, so it's not really apples to apples for me. And like, I hesitate to put Ohio State in that position relative to Georgia, because I'd like to see what the results look like if they played 10 times in 10 years, right? Because I don't think it'd be 9-1 Georgia, right? I think it'd probably be close to split. And if it's close to split, then it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
So I think I am not quite there on that comparison.
So on the overall question, here's my view of what Ohio State fans should think of Georgia and Georgia fans. And this is like a philosophical thing. I've talked about it before. Ohio State has been the king of the North for ever. And like, not now, Michigan's the national champ, so Michigan's the king of the North. But historically, what has happened is that Ohio State has been the standard bearer in this part of the country. And there has been a rotating group of teams who have been the best team in the South. And the result is Ohio State winds up getting compared to whoever the best team is from the South. So in the early 2000s, the U is, right, late 90s, early 2000s, the U is steamrolling everybody. And now it's Ohio State versus the U. Now, listen, 86, Penn State had a thing with Miami, right? Notre Dame and Miami had a thing, Catholics and convicts. But who really sort of ended the U? Ohio State did. Okay. Now
Larry Coker, but okay.
Art Modell luring Butch Davis away with that Cleveland Browns money kind of ended him. Then we get to the Nick Saban rise. Well, then we get to, here comes Urban, son of Ohio, goes to Florida. Okay, now Ohio State's the best team in the country. Miami's dead, but now what does Ohio State have to do? Now Ohio State has to go up against Florida, who's now the new best team in the South. Okay, that doesn't work out. Ohio State loses. Now guess what? Now they have a down year. At Florida, Tebow wins the Heisman, but they're not the best team. LSU's the best team. Who's there to go against LSU? Ohio State. Oh, Ohio State loses. Oh, they can't beat the South. But it's a different Southern team. Where was LSU in 2002? Where was Florida in 2007? It's always Ohio State. All right, now it's Bama. Now Nick Saban rises up. Nick Saban dispatches Urban. Nick Saban's beaten everybody. All right, Ohio State finally gets their shot at Nick Saban in Alabama. What do? They win the first college football playoff by beating Alabama. All right, now there's a challenger to Alabama. Who is it? It's Clemson. All right, let's have Ohio State beat Clemson. Ohio State-Clemson is a little rivalry. They lose in 19. They get revenge in 20. It's a huge deal. All right, now it's Clemson. It's Ohio State versus whatever Southern team is good. And now it's Georgia. And now Georgia's like, Javon Bullard took at you. Oh, where's my hat? Hold on a second.
Oh, there he is.
Where's Marv now, man? How's Javon Bullard feeling, brother? Hey, Noah Ruggles, what's up? You guys know Stetson Bennett? Yes. Georgia fan. I have a question about Georgia was from the period where Georgia was from 1968 to 2018. I believe that's a 50-year period of irrelevance. Hey, brother, I ain't got no memory. It's all about the dogs. I love the dogs. So that's what. Ohio State's
you're
like,
not going to be
man,
welcome. You're not going to be welcome in the state of Georgia like very soon. You're going to have
How about
signs.
this? I'll be respectful.
There you go.
Go dogs. Ohio State has been tasked with beating whoever rises up from the South. And then whoever rises up is like, take that, Ohio State. And then they vanish. What's LSU doing now, right? It's like LSU's like, go Joe's out. We got LSU, irrelevant. Miami, currently irrelevant. Florida, currently irrelevant. Alabama, we'll see what happens now that Saban's gone. I don't know. But now it's Georgia. Clemson, irrelevant. So right now it's like Ohio State in moments. They did beat Miami. They couldn't beat Florida. They couldn't beat LSU. They couldn't beat Clemson until they did beat Clemson. They did beat Alabama. Then they lost to Alabama. Right now, Where are LSU, Clemson, Miami, and Florida compared to Ohio State? Not nearly as good, but now it's Georgia time. Now it's like, oh, Ohio State can't compete with the dog. So this is the world. So the world is Ohio State. It's always Ohio State. And then whichever of the 14, it's going to be Texas one day. Oh, take that. Oh, congratulations on sucking for 20 years and firing 10 different coaches. But you happen to play Ohio State now. Ohio State's always there.
Yeah.
So that's your answer. It's like you're the little flower. You're the little flower that bloomed in the South. It's going to get eaten by a raccoon tomorrow, and another flower is going to come up. But Ohio State's always there. So that's like my message to the dogs, but to Ohio State fans of that is what makes all this so very, very difficult. And it's why I don't want Ohio State fans to be upset, because in a moment, perhaps you did not beat the team that the South determined is now the good team, which constantly changes, while in the North, it never changes. Now, it has. This is not taking anything away from Michigan. But it's not like Ohio State vanished. And it's not like coming into this season, it's like, oh, thank goodness, let Michigan take on the South. Ohio State. No, it's back to Ohio State, right?
Yeah, right.
So that's what Ohio State fans should think of Georgia fans. You're here for now, and we acknowledge it. But where have you been? We've always been here.
Yeah. And we'll be here after you leave.
After you leave. And we'll be having this same discussion with Ole Miss or Tennessee or Florida State or Texas, whatever fly-by-night momentary operation in the bottom half of the country has a good 3-year run. And we're here. So do it now. Do it now, because you're going to be this hat. I'm not going to be wearing a dog hat in 3 years. I'll be wearing a tee, an orange tee. Whether it's Texas
used to be wearing Longhorns. She doesn't have one like Mickey Mouse ears, but they're Longhorns. Longhorn steer Longhorns. Is that? Yeah. Be good luck for you. He's got horns down already.
Horns down. Just preemptively here. Can we cut this too? Horns down, just in case Texas is good. That's all. So that to me is, and I'm not saying that as like an Ohio State homer. I just would like Ohio State fans to understand and appreciate that. I'm not saying they don't, but I don't think it's fair to be frustrated by the fact that Ohio State might not be good as the best Southern team in a given year, when if you lay it out long term against anybody, if you go back far enough, if you pull in the right era in between Bear Bryant and Nick Saban, you'd take Ohio State, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And everybody else that we just talked about, you'd take Ohio State long-term, like no question.
Yeah.
That's all. So that's what you should think of Georgia fans. You should think congratulations on mattering in this brief moment in time. But Ohio State's always here.
Yep.
I'm hot. I'm sweaty.
That's a good answer.
It's just it doesn't like it's like a counterfactual. Like it's not real. You know what I mean? Like it's I would tell my kids the same thing. Which so anyway, this comes into our guy Eddie, who says a request to define Doug mentality. Because we talk about dog mentality on Kings of the North a lot. Again, if you like me screaming about Georgia, watch KOTN. I thought about this the other day. This is probably the best definition of Doug mentality. Being at a restaurant, getting a cup of water, going over to the fountain, looking at it, being like, man, I wouldn't mind a little shot of Diet Coke, but being like, that is not what you're doing here. You got a cup of water, and then being on alert for anyone who looks like maybe they got a water cup and is then going to try to get lemonade.
Yeah.
Or soda from the fountain, being on alert for it, hoping someone does it so that I can then get in a fight with them about them stealing from the fountain. That's Doug mentality.
That's perfect.
Handling your business, being on alert for other people to see if they handle theirs, and hoping they don't so you can confront them.
Yeah. No one I've met in my life loves an imaginary fight more than you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
which
or
is good because like
hypothetical fight, I guess.
Hypothetical fight. If I actually got in a fight, if I was like, hey, did you pay for that lemonade? And the person was like, do you have a problem with it? I'd be like, no. And I go sit down. But in my head, I'm standing up for society. Oh, hypothetical fights.
I don't think you'd back down. I think you would find the words to cut to that person's core and then just walk out of the store.
Yeah. And then maybe get my butt kicked in the parking lot.
Yeah, maybe like they catch up to you like 2 miles down the road. You'd own that particular moment in the store.
I would own the moment. I'm like Georgia. I own the moment. And then the person's like, I'm not going anywhere. I've been here. That's the one thing when I get on Georgia. Dog mentality and Doug mentality actually have a lot in common. They're brief and fleeting and highfalutin. So, all right, let's do, this is like a bigger picture question, which we like to, I mean, it's not like we're never going to talk about big picture just because we have a national Northern show on Kings of the North, which we would direct you to. Mm-hmm. We can still do it here in Kings of Columbus. From our guy, John, what Big Ten teams are ready to take a step forward this year and do any pose a bigger threat to the top teams, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, Penn State, than we may be giving them credit for? Who leaped to mind for you on this question?
Probably Nebraska, I think. It's like the combination of they have a decent amount of returning production. They have a new exciting quarterback in Dylan Raiola, and Matt Rule's usually pretty good in year two. Like there's tangible evidence of his program's taking a nice step forward in their second year, and like their schedule. We talked about this on Kings of the North a lot. Like their schedule sets up nicely for them to have a really good season. But I also think that fosters confidence too, right? I'm not trying to necessarily make Nebraska out to be better than they are this current season, but I do think if they are a team that starts the season undefeated, which I think they could, like before they come play Ohio State, like that's a team that'll be feeling pretty good about itself and potentially playing pretty well. So that team leaps to mind first is what Nebraska might do this year.
And I've certainly been on the Iowa bandwagon on KOTN. I do think what Iowa did defensively, bringing back so many of their guys, is pretty similar to what Ohio State did. They lost Cooper DeJean, but they have other great secondary players back, including Xavier Wampa at safety. They have good linebackers led by Jay Higgins, who might be the best linebacker in the Big Ten. They have guys up front. And so I think their defense is going to be a top 5 defense nationally, like not just statistically, but like eyeball test. And if the offense goes from historically incompetent to okay, that's a huge leap. And they'll get Luke Lachey healthy at tight end, Jim Lachey's son, who will be one of the best tight ends in the country. LaShawn Williams is a true number 1 back. Caleb Brown, the Ohio State transfer, gives them a little something at receiver. And Cade McNamara is a quarterback who's led a playoff run before at Michigan. He's got to come back from an ACL and be healthy. They lost Caden Proctor, the Alabama transfer, on the offensive line, but their offensive line is still going to be good. I think they have a chance to give Ohio State a game. Like if that could be a very good defensive battle between Ohio State and Iowa. And again, we've talked about this on Kings of the North. I had said, what if Nebraska and Iowa going into their game on Black Friday are both 9-2? And then I looked at their schedules and I was like, man, you look at the schedule and who they play, and you think to yourself, it's possible they could both be 10-1 with their losses being to Ohio State. Yeah. But there's nobody else, because they don't play Oregon, they don't play Michigan. There's nobody else that they play that you would say, well, Nebraska and Iowa can't beat those guys. Now, are they going to win all 10 of those? Probably not, which is why 9-2 makes more sense. But you've got to be on alert for Iowa's defense this year for sure.
I think Nebraska's second most difficult game besides coming to Columbus is probably at USC.
Okay.
They play Colorado in week 2. And Iowa.
We like Iowa State a lot, so Cyhawk game will be a banger.
Cyhawk or I don't know, Wisconsin at home at UCLA. It is not a very difficult schedule for Iowa this year either. Yeah.
But those answers are not only based on schedule, right? Those answers are based on, John sort of cut off the top 4. So who else? Like I think those are real teams, but the schedule is going to allow them to show it. That Iowa and Nebraska could be good. And if it was like, oh, they have a stretch where they play Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State 3 out of 4 weeks, like, okay, well, they might be really good, but that's going to be a tough stretch for them. But so those are the two teams that we've talked about a lot on KOTN that I think you guys can watch for. This last one is something that I did with our friend, my special guest, Shahan Jeharaja, on the KOTN at the end of last week. And it was just to mix it up a little bit because it was an Ohio State themed show about whether the Buckeyes are natty or bust. So it was a heavy Ohio State show. I also did some research on other teams in the BCS era that I thought had been national championship or bust, but I sort of wanted an outside perspective on Ohio State from somebody. And I thought Shahan did a really good job, gave us some interesting stuff on that. I'm going to do some more natty or bust stuff with texter reaction on a future show, but I wanted you to check in on this, Bill, and make sure that we have your voice. And this is Jared who asked, I just wrapped up listening to Kings of the North with all the talk about this being a championship or bust season for the Bucks. What does that mean for Ryan Day if we bust? Not that I agree with it, but there's always chatter about hot seats when you lose to your rival 3 times in a row and haven't won a championship or a bowl game in a couple of years. So,
yeah,
what do you think of that, the bust part of that conversation?
I think like at minimum, bust means Ryan Day is very much in the hot seat going into 2025. It could be more dramatic than that, depending on how it plays out, right? Like if you don't beat Michigan, you don't win the Big Ten, you don't win a national championship, I would not want to be Ryan Day. I don't think. Like I think that is not a spot I'd want to be in necessarily. I'm not saying I think at this moment that he would definitely lose his job if that were to happen. But if you combine that after gearing up the way they did this year with the results leading up to this season, with the fact that there's a new athletic director, like I don't think it's a great spot for any head coach to be in. I don't think like he automatically is losing his job if they don't win a national championship. I think the context matters tremendously to the conversation. But I do think if they do not win a national championship there, then I think he is going into 2025 probably needing to prove something. If that makes sense.
I think there's a vast difference between a non-national championship season that includes a Michigan loss and a Michigan win.
Mm-hmm.
Like a Michigan loss, a Michigan loss, 4 straight to Michigan and not a national championship. I agree with you. I agree with you, which his stated position is would not be fired at the end of this year, but there would be a lot of offseason talk, and 2025 would be a bit of a show me year. And then if we're talking about 5 straight losses to Michigan, then I think anything's possible, right?
Right.
If you beat Michigan, even if that includes an Oregon loss, which again, Ohio State is a small underdog at Oregon right now. We just have to understand that idea. Ohio State fans, I mean, you do understand it, but it's a road trip to the other side of the country in the middle of the year against one of the other 4 best teams. Like that's certainly a losable game, even if you are the best team in the country. So a world where it's like, well, they lose to Oregon, but then they beat Michigan. Maybe you even like, I don't know, maybe you beat everybody, but you lose in the Big Ten title game and now you're not a 1 seed, whatever. But then you just get into the playoff and you play a Georgia type game, right? Or you play, you have like a Clemson 2019 playoff loss. You have a Georgia 2022 playoff loss, like something like that, where you've beaten Michigan, but that's why you don't win the national title. I actually think the pressure would be relieved to some degree. It would be short of the ultimate goal, but you would have beaten Michigan and reestablished yourself as like, absolutely, this is one of the best teams in the country. And like they missed a field goal. What are you going to do? Right.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. Like sometimes I feel like the national conversation about Ryan Day is like focuses a little too much on national championship. And I think Ohio State fans more have it right that it's like Ohio State has its 3 goals every year and it hasn't done any of them in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
So like if you're able to check off a couple of those boxes, then like I think he's not like in great shape, right? Because Ohio State, we've said before, like is a program that expects to win probably. I think it's reasonable to expect a national championship like once a decade. And maybe more than that. I don't know, but that's like been historic track record of late. So he would still be short of that. But, you know, if he beats Michigan and wins the Big Ten and they lose a banger in the postseason to a really good team, I don't know that puts him in a terrible position.
The other thing is I think there's a difference between not winning a national championship and showing as a head coach that you can't win a national championship.
Can't win one. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is there something that you would believe that there's in-game management or motivation or having your team prepared that when you get to these big games, the coaching is responsible for the losses? Or are you right there? You did everything you could and the other team was good too. Maybe there was some bad luck involved, right?
Yeah.
So
I do like that actually, I think Ryan Day will be like in an interesting spotlight in that regard, I think, this year, because I think you can point to moments, right? You can point to, I know that the Clemson playoff game in 2019, there is reason to feel like that game was like taken away from Ohio State, but there were also things in that game that they did not execute well enough in key situations to win that game, right? And I think you'd probably say the same thing about the loss to Georgia in the Peach Bowl and some of the game management stuff there. And the conversation got louder and louder about, like, can Ryan Day do everything and be the play caller? It's like, well, now he's giving that up. And then if those same issues creep up in the year where he's not trying to balance all those things, then I think you start asking those questions for sure.
And it's similar to the Ohio State conversation to me. Who's Ryan Day always been compared to since he got hired as a head coach? One guy, right? Lincoln Riley.
Lincoln Riley,
right? Yeah. Is that not the national conversation? Who's the better offensive guru?
Yeah, nationally, yeah.
Where's Lincoln Riley right now? How's Lincoln Riley doing?
Not great. He's got Heisman's.
No one cares. He had the returning Heisman winner, #1 pick in the draft, and completely blew that season because he hung on to a defensive coordinator that should have been fired. Finally fired him, and now they're coming in the Big Ten, and nobody cares.
Yeah.
So the Ryan Day, it's like the Ryan Day Lincoln Riley battle. Who's winning that battle right this moment? Ryan Day. But now that's not the conversation anymore. It's like, Lincoln Riley sucks. Now let's ask why Ryan Day isn't Kirby Smart or Dan Lanning. And it's like, I do think, again, you have to keep that in mind of, is your standard for your coach, your program, the way you feel about yourselves, is your standard constantly comparing yourself and your team to whoever is the best? And then you feel like you're constantly falling short.
Mm-hmm.
Tough way to live. Like, how could we be, right? If Lincoln Riley how could Ryan Day get fired while Lincoln Riley's going like 8-4 at USC? It's like, what do we do? Like, what? Like, for real, right? Like, Lincoln Riley's going to be like, oh, well, whatever. It's like, Pete Carroll had that thing rolling. What are you're the savior. You can't beat Utah?
Yeah.
All right, Ohio State can't beat Michigan. Have you seen Michigan? You can't beat Utah with the Heisman winner. Okay. All right. That'll wrap it up for our wonderful texter interaction. When we come back, we will do What You Watching, What You Eating, What You Thinking on Kings of Columbus. Back on Kings of Columbus, the second KOTN show this week, Bill, we are planning to do the best Big Fours in the North, which we are defining as your quarterback and then your 3 best skill guys. And our 26 Northern teams, we're going to draft the top 10 Big Fours, which is an interesting exercise. There's plenty of teams that win with great offensive line play or great defense. We're not doing that. We're just doing skill guys. But we'll do that for the Thursday show. I'm kind of looking forward to that.
I'm very excited because I was going through compiling who should even be considered, and there were probably 4 or 5. Like, oh, that's pretty good. I wasn't thinking of them, but that looks not bad.
And there are a couple teams that are maybe not that good on the offensive line or on defense that have 4 dudes.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And
the quarterback will never have time to get them the ball, but
right. Theoretically, it's theoretical football. And there are other teams that are going to be excellent teams that you're actually kind of like, oh, they're not as duded up as I would think they are.
Yeah.
So would you imagine that Ohio State will be drafted in the top 10 in that exercise?
I think they will be drafted in the top 10. Yes.
Do you think Ohio State's second team of dudes will be drafted in? I
think they would. If they were eligible, yes, I think they would.
Yeah. Team Brandon Ennis, Trevion Henderson, Julian Sayin, and Jelani Thurman. I'm taking them second. All right, let's do What You Watching, What You Eating, What You Thinking, What You Watching, Bill Landis.
My watching is more of a listening, I guess. I had a drive over the weekend. I had to go out to Long Island, New York, which I'll never do that drive again. I'll tell you why. But I was like just listening to the podcast mostly on the way there, and I had never listened to. I think this is a few years old, but I think it's like the Ringer did like 60 songs that explain the 90s.
Yes.
And I only listened to one episode of it. I listened to the episode about Santeria by Sublime, but it was a very cool concept for a show. I rather enjoyed it, and I am now like brainstorming ways to steal that idea and do something Ohio State related with like a similar thing.
Can I tell you a little thing? That's funny. I wish you had done this 2 weeks ago. So do you know that the guy who does that lives in Columbus?
Yeah, it's Rob
Harvilla.
Harvilla, yeah.
Who I had on my old podcast at cleveland.com once upon a time. And he actually lives in the same town I live in. And at my local library, like 2 weeks ago, they had a night with him because he wrote a book based on the podcast that is 60 songs that explain the 90s. And I went and he gave a little talk about his book.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, I know who he was. I knew he was from Ohio. I know he was from Cleveland, but I wasn't sure like exactly where he like resides now.
Yeah.
And also unsure if he's an Ohio State fan, but
he's definitely a Browns fan.
Yeah. He wrote a really good article about like I think it was him. Like my favorite, or one of my top 2 favorite bands, I guess, is a band called the Gaslight Anthem.
Yeah.
From New Jersey, and he wrote a really good article about like their debut album a couple years ago. That's like one of my favorite things I've ever read. So
he also wrote the reason I had him on to talk about the Browns when I was at cleveland.com is that he wrote a story for the Ringer about Mary Kay Cabot and how Mary Kay Cabot covered the horrible Browns for like 30 years and what that experience was like for her. So crazy, man. All right. I give you the book. So I like got, this is again, how I think. So it's like there's like 40 people there. So the little book signing at the end, you can come up and get your book signed by the guy. So I was like, Hey, Rob, Doug Lesmerises, you were on my podcast. And he was like, what? And I was like, it wasn't one of the great moments of your life.
You didn't catalog that one.
And then he was like, who should I make it out to? And I said like my whole name and I started spelling my last name. And he was like, is it okay if I just put Doug? And I was like, okay, I thought we were like compadres in the podcast world and like on the same level. And you're like, who is this person who claims to have spoken to me before? Please get out of the line. And I thought we were going to be like, hey man, you want to come on Kings of Columbus and just chill for a little bit? He was like, go away.
Get away from me.
So
that's funny.
All right. So my Steve Carell, they announced this week, has like a new sitcom coming out that he's going to do. I can't remember
on HBO, right?
Yeah. Can't remember what it's about, but it reminded me of this because I've wanted to do this on Whatcha for a while. Did you ever watch the show he did, Space Force, when he was like the leader of Space Force? It was on Netflix.
I tried.
I tried so hard. He had a scratchy voice in it. He decided to talk like this. And it was like, oh, scratchy voice, Steve Carell, just do your thing. But the thing that's interesting about that is my wife, my lovely wife, her first boyfriend in college. And as that show came out, this just happened to get dropped into conversation in the Lesmerises household. Her first boyfriend in college actually became the first leader of Space Force.
Oh, wow. Nice.
When they created it. And I just talk on a podcast. So that was a good one. And we'd go up and like visit my daughter at college, and we would drive past this other school, and she'd be like, oh yeah, I went to an ROTC thing with Tony at that. Tony, who became leader of Space Force. How's your podcast?
That's a good connect to have though. When we have to colonize Mars, you might be able to get higher up on the list.
Hey, listen, man, I'm happy to do a podcast on Mars about college football. Any way I can help out. So anyway, be careful of who your wife dates in her previous life and whether they make a TV show about that person's life. All right, what are you eating?
I'm not eating anything because I have hand, foot, and mouth disease.
Oh my God.
And it hurts to eat. So I'm eating applesauce. That's what I'm eating at the moment. It feels like I'm swallowing razor blades when I eat something. So
that is unbelievable.
Yeah.
What an odd collection of body parts to have
It is very
associated in a
strange.
single disease.
Yeah, and it happens in like stages too. It's weird. It's like I had the sore throat, and like that's getting a little better, and now like my hands look like mutant hands, and now I'm starting to get the same sores on my feet. And like I just want them to go. They're on my face too. You probably see them on my face, but I just want it to go away. It sucks. And my son, like I got it because my son is in daycare, and they don't tell you when you send your children to daycare that they come back with every disease known to man to spread to their parents. But apparently it's much worse in adults than it is in children. Yeah. Because my my wife always gets annoyed with me because I'm very bad at being sick. Like if I'm sick, it's the worst thing that's ever happened to anybody. Yeah. But she took my son to the pediatrician yesterday, and the pediatrician said like, "Oh yeah, he's actually sick. Like you should be nice to him about me." So I felt good about that.
Oh, that was nice of the doctor.
Yeah. It was very nice of her.
I mean, and it sounds you said you're going to the doctor's like, I have hand, foot, mouth disease. It sounds horrible. Like it sounds like, are we on a countdown clock now? What are we talking about? And it's just like there's no medicine and it'll go away, but in the meantime, you'll be in excruciating pain.
Basically, yeah. Cool. Like take Tylenol and ibuprofen and have fun. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those like diseases where it's like, it's not serious enough for people to be, it's like, oh, what are you doing? It's like, I'm researching, I'm going to cure hand, foot, and mouth disease. It's like, for real? Isn't there more important stuff to do? So it's just going to be like this forever.
Yeah.
Suffering with sores on their hands. So I have another, I thought you enjoyed my question. Are nuts wood? So I have another food question I want to ask you. So you know that I don't drink beer. Yep. I've had 4 ounces of beer in my entire life. I went on a brewery tour when I was a kid. The smell overwhelmed me to the point of nausea, and it steered me away from beer for my entire life. But I do enjoy wheat thins. I think they're a delicious little cracker snack. And I'm thinking like wheat, right? Hops, wheat. Does beer taste like liquid wheat thins? Because if that's what beer tastes like, I love wheat thins. And do I have to reinvestigate beer in my 50s?
I bet there probably is a wheat beer that you could find to your liking somewhere. I don't know if there's one that tastes exactly like liquid wheat thins.
Okay.
That sounds kind of gross.
Sounds good.
But there are like a Blue Moon, like that's like a wheat beer with like a little bit of an orange flavor to it, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. Austin would probably be the guy to ask more than me. I just sort of like drink what's in front of me. Okay. I'm not all that picky or all that discerning with my beer palate. But I bet you could find a wheat beer that you would like. Yeah.
Okay. If anyone has suggestions, I'm looking for something that tastes like wheat thins.
You go back home, and if you're ever back home in Central PA or whatever, South Central PA, go to Trogs and get Dreamweaver.
Oh,
try that out.
Very weedy, high wheat content.
Very weedy. Yeah, very weedy beer. Yeah.
Okay. All right. What are you thinking about other than your disease?
Other than my disease, I think I used to not be afraid of heights when I was a child, and I think I am afraid of them as an adult.
Oh.
Yeah, I discovered
this. Yeah.
On Friday, I said I had to drive to Long Island. So I left here on Friday, stayed in PA Friday night, and then was supposed to have a 2-hour drive from where I was in Pennsylvania to where I had to go in Long Island. Ended up being like a 6-hour drive because it took like 2 hours to get across the George Washington Bridge.
Oh,
and sitting on the George Washington Bridge, as you can feel it moving up and down, that is what told me that I am now afraid of heights.
Yes.
Yeah. There was like a thing, like I guess someone as a means of protest decided they were going to try to climb the George Washington Bridge. So that ended up closing a couple of lanes, both on the upper level and the lower level where I was. So it was just like a parking lot trying to get across that
Oh my God.
And I did not like sitting on that bridge.
But do you think the person solved the problem they were protesting by doing that? Probably
I can't
solved it,
imagine.
right?
I can't
Yeah.
imagine they did.
Fixed.
Unless their problem was convenience of travel. They nipped that in the bud for sure.
More adults need to be scared of heights.
Yeah.
I need to get this message out. So I do think there's a difference in being scared of heights between like, hey, I don't want to go on a high roller coaster and I'm afraid of plunging to my death, which is a very adult way. Like when you're a kid. Have you been to Niagara Falls?
I have. Yeah.
Especially with my children, I think that someone's going to go over the rail and plunge to their death at Niagara Falls. So I make us stand like in the middle of the sidewalk and I crawl over to the bars, like on my stomach, and I'm screaming at my children, get away from the edge, get away from the edge. Like that's a very reasonable fear of heights in my mind. Like, yeah, you could be stuck on a bridge and the bridge collapses. What are you going to do? Right. So I'm okay with this. I back your fear of heights.
I've only been to Niagara Falls once, and this was like we were standing on the edge of the railing and I'm watching the water going over the falls, and all I kept thinking about was like, man, that looks refreshing. It's like that is not the thing you want to be thinking as you're standing on the edge of the Niagara Falls. But it was hot and the water's clear and it just looked cold. Like, just dunk my head in.
We just heard him scream, "It looks refreshing!" as he went over the side. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe it is. I don't know. I haven't been on a roller coaster in quite some time. I wonder now how I would feel if I got on like a really high roller coaster. But yeah, I used to not be afraid of bridges, but I think maybe I'm afraid of bridges now.
Yeah. Well, sorry about that. So my wife revealed something to me that I had not realized, and again, it was eye-opening to me in not a great way. So, like when my wife and my children and I are on a text thread, my wife said that if we ask one of our children a question, and if they respond with yeah or yes, something like that, everything is fine. If they just respond yes, yes, they're mad.
Yeah. Oh, you didn't know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, because my older daughter especially will respond like YAHHHHHH, and I just thought that was the same as YES, and apparently it is not. And then I was going back through my phone and being like, man, I have a lot of yeses on here. You knew that?
Yeah, I knew that. Yeah. Because I do the same thing. I do the same thing.
Oh, man. I just thought yes was a way of communicating agreement. I didn't realize it was percolating anger.
Yeah, if you get like a yes or an okay from me, it means I'm annoyed.
Oh my God. Now I'm going to go back through our text interactions and look for yeses and okays. See, if I'm annoyed on text, you're going to get like an F off from me. Like I'm not trying to leave anything to the imagination.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I also used to, when I would reply yeah to a text, I would do YEA. And now I do YEAH because you said something to me about it. Like when we first started working together 10 years ago.
That's why you left Cleveland.com. My God, I can't even text this guy without getting my grammar correct. Oh, well, maybe I'll just stop texting because there's nothing good in it for me. All right, that'll do it for this version of Kings of Columbus. If you guys want to check out Kings of the North, we certainly would invite you to do that. 2 shows this week. We'll be back with another texter interaction show next week that will be QB focused. When I did the call out, I save questions. I do new call outs for questions, and I saved everything related to quarterbacking at Ohio State for a show on its own. So that's why we did not discuss that here, but we will do that next week on Kings of Columbus. For now, thanks as always to our great producer, Mike Urostowski, who makes us look good and sound good. He's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of Columbus.